following. Mr. Speaker, we are aware that we are coming from the backdrop of a world economy that has been shrinking and a world economy that has had challenges basically because of the COVID-19, the pandemic. So, Mr. Speaker, in the 2020 to 2021, the world economy contracted at the rate of 3.3%, Mr. Speaker. That was almost going to recession. And, Mr. Speaker, the world economy is now projected to grow at 6%. Fortunately for Kenya, we didn't contract, but we grew at very low rates of 0.6%. The Treasury is projecting, the government is projecting that in this current, financial year, 2021-2022, we will grow at an average of 6.3%. Mr. Speaker, looking at it in terms of numerical terms, you may think that is a very good growth, but it is a good growth coming from a very low percentage. And so it is not such it is not going to have a big impact on the economy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one thing that I want to point out as positive in this budget is the fact that this budget, for the first time, has that there is nexus between the budget policy statement and the budget estimates. Previously, we have had cases where the budget estimates, the difference between the budget estimates and the budget policy statement is as clear as day and night. For the first time, the ceilings have been respected between from budget policy statement to the budget estimates. And I think that is commendable. But it is also because IMF is in town. I'm wondering if IMF was not in town, whether this discipline that we have seen from the Treasury would have been there in the first place. Mr. Speaker, something else that I would also want to point out in this budget, the budget estimates of 2021-2022, which is different from what we have been having previously, is that the projected revenue growth is modest. Previously, Mr. Speaker, the Treasury used to come up with overambitious budget estimates. But for the first time, the budget estimates look realistic. The revenue estimate of 2,038 billion or 39 billion is modest. The ordinary revenue is expected to move from the current 1,594 billion to 1,776 billion. Mr. Speaker, that is not overambitious. Why I say that is because in 2018-2019, we managed to collect 1,704 billion. And in 2019-2020, we actually managed to collect 1,734 billion. And therefore, projecting this financial year 2021-2022, that we can collect 1,776 is not being overambitious. But Mr. Speaker, I still want to repeat that we are in what I have been terming as Hakuna Pesa economy. Mr. Speaker, there is still a challenge as to whether we are able to finance our budget. We are not, because the money that we pay, the debtors, the debt, is 1.2 trillion now, Mr. Speaker, against a possible revenue collection of 2 trillion, Mr. Speaker. If you are spending 1.2 trillion on debt repayment alone and interest, Mr. Speaker, that is a sad state. And besides that, the recurrent expenditure is of equal amount, 1.2 trillion. That totaled up comes to 2.4 trillion, Mr. Speaker. Already you have consumed the entire budget or the entire projected revenue, which therefore means, Mr. Speaker, as I've always said, that as a country we need to face and say the truth, that we are borrowing money to meet recurrent expenditure. And that is against the Constitution, it is against our Public Finance Management Act, and it is even immoral, and it is unjust and unfair to the future generation. Because, Mr. Speaker, what we are doing to the future generation of this country is that we are not creating assets for them to generate revenue, yet we are putting debt burden on them going forward. Mr. Speaker, what are some of the reasons why we have ended up where we are? Why we are now saying we are in a Hakuna Pesa economy? Mr. Speaker, one of them is what we have talked about here severally, and I want to repeat, and many members have talked about it. when we ask Kenyans to provide goods and services to the government, we must be prepared and ready to pay them. We should not order for goods and services and sign contracts when we don't have the financial power and capability to pay, hence ending up with pending bills, which is suffocating the economy, because those Kenyans who have offered goods and services to the government have no money to continue doing business, and we cripple them and we discourage investment, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, of course, it has been talked about the debt levels, Mr. Speaker. This must be managed. Between 2013 and 2019, Mr. Speaker, we went into borrowing spree as a country and borrowing expensive loans. Right now, we are borrowing loans, some of which are at zero interest and with very generous repayment period. But from 2013 to 2019, Mr. Speaker, we were careless as a country. We didn't care where we were borrowing. We went out there to borrow Eurobond at 8%. We came back with that money. Some of it was stolen. Some of it was used to clean streets, things that don't add value to the economy. And therefore, you are borrowing money and you are not putting it in productive sector of the economy. How else do you expect to be able to pay that loan when the time comes? The other reason, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of stalled projects. Mr. Speaker, across the country, we have stalled projects. They have been totaled up, that all the stalled projects, the money that has been invested in all the stalled projects in the country, amounts to 9 trillion shillings, Mr. Speaker. That is close to the GDP of this country. The GDP of this country is now at 11 trillion. And 9 trillion of our money is put in projects that don't add value to the economy. The projects have been started, left at some percentage. Some are 40% complete, 60% complete, 70% complete. We still start initiating new projects, yet we have projects that have been started and no one is ready to complete those projects so that they can create value and wealth in the economy. How else then would you pay loans that you have taken to start those projects or initiate those projects if those projects are not completed to be able to add value to the economy? Mr. Speaker, it is a responsibility that we must address. The other issue, Mr. Speaker, that needs to be addressed is the issue of ongoing projects. And I'm sure my other colleagues have spoken about it. Mr. Speaker, this country, when you move around, you see so many projects, ongoing projects. But the way the budget estimates are presented to us, it is almost impossible to know the state of those stalled projects. You don't know whether they are 20% complete, whether they are 70% complete, or 90% complete. How then would you properly budget for projects if you don't know the degree and the level and the percentage of completion? Mr. Speaker, the Treasury must change their budget format to include ongoing projects and present them in a way that we are able to determine how much investment we need to put in ongoing projects to realize to have these projects completed so that they can add value to this economy. Mr. Speaker, this is something that we need to address and address quickly. Mr. Speaker, we need also to be very clear. Another thing that is also causing slowed economic growth in the country is, for you, Mr. Speaker, those of us who have a financial background, Mr. Speaker, would tell you that if you want to spur economic growth, you need to take money to the grassroots. That is why we come up with economic stimulus package. That is why CDF is employing so many people at the grassroots. That is why devolution in the first place, we fought so hard to bring devolution in this country. However, Mr. Speaker, no, that bottom-up is now yours. First of all, you don't even understand the meaning of bottom-up economy. I am very sure if I challenge you to explain clearly what bottom-up economy means, you will start talking about wheelbarrows. That is not bottom-up economy. Let me, you know, this is not we are not in a hostel, Honorable Sankok. This is now, we are debating budget estimates. When we will discuss cancer bill, I will give you time to speak. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say that, Mr. Speaker, we have been fighting to devolve even more resources to the grassroots to spur economic growth, because that is the only way that this country is going to realize meaningful development and meaningful economic growth. However, Mr. Speaker, those managers who have been tasked with the responsibility of managing our funds at the grassroots level are disappointing us. They are stealing the same way the national government officials are stealing. And therefore, we devolve resources to spur economic growth, but those resources don't end up spurring economic growth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude my contribution by saying that there are certain things that as a House, and Mr. Speaker, by the way, yesterday I was in some program, and one of the leading economists in this country actually was saying that Kenyans will slap us, the same way you saw one of the presidents of a friendly country was slapped, that Kenyans will end up caning us. But Mr. Speaker, also it is easier said than done. You know, when you are not in the field playing, you may think that if you are put there, you would do much better work. But when you get into the field, it becomes a totally different ballgame. So, Mr. Speaker, but as people's representatives, as members of parliament, we have, and more particularly members of National Assembly, the people of Kenya, through the 2010 Constitution, saw it fit to give us the power of the purse, gave us more power to control and approve the budget. I am aware that it is the executive's responsibility and duty to come up with programs and implement them, and that the budget belongs really to executive, and that we don't know which programs the government would be running. But when we are convinced that there are certain programs that don't make sense, we should not shy away from insisting and standing our ground against the executive. We need to insist, like so many committees have made some proposals, good proposals, to reallocate funds from this program to the other, and where we are not increasing the budget deficit, I don't see why the executive should just insist that we are not going to accept such good proposals in reallocating funds within the ministry, but from one program to the other. I think on that one, we need to just insist and push through, because we have the power of the purse. We are a budget-making institution. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support the motion on the budget estimates.
Honorable Ichung'wa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I also rise to contribute to this motion on the approval of the budget estimates and the committee's report.